Oh, after all these years, it's hard to keep it up.
It defined the 80s as much as Reagan, Thatcher and Filofaxes. 300 million people would get in a lather every week over the world's first super soap, Dallas.
I'm still a hero down there. They love me, and I love them. I made them a lot of money, and they made me a lot of money. Dallas is a good town.
You could either make yourself nuts by trying to remember the plot, or you could just do every scene exactly the same, and then it didn't matter.
Good morning, darling. More coffee, darling. How are you this morning, JR?
Even now, you say the show was watched by 300 million people. It's just mind-boggling.
We were recognized every day of our lives in over 100 countries around the world.
I don't miss being that famous, and I don't miss getting up that early every day. But I do miss the faces of that cast that I love so much.
For most of the last century, Dallas was famous as a cowboy town, as the oil capital of America, as the city where JFK was shot.
The first unconfirmed reports say the president was hit in the head.
But then it became the city where JR got shot. And Dallas became the home of Dallas. Dallas was a story of the Ewings, a feuding family of oil barons who were incredibly rich, but still all lived together on a tiny Texan ranch called South Fork. Tonight, we meet the family behind the family and learn how the cast stuck together when real life mirrored the on-screen tragedies and traumas. And the cast returned to South Fork to relive some of their finest moments.
I got to shove JR in the swimming pool. Do you remember that?
Was he not expecting it? This is scripted?
No, sort of like you're not.
And with unprecedented access to Dallas outtakes, we reveal the non-stop party that went on behind the scenes.
Oh, I think so.
Patrick Duffy has the greatest sense of humor. So when we were lined up to do these photographs that would be seen around the world, just as the photographer would say, okay, ready, Patrick would stick his hand up my ass. That's the only way to describe it. And there would be a complete look of surprise and shock on my face, and there would be a look of utter satisfaction on his. And that would always be the shot they used.
For 13 years, the Ewings of South Fork were television's dysfunctional first family. JR was the eldest son, a backstabbing businessman. Sue Ellen was his anguished, alcoholic wife.
You're a drunk and unfit mother. The sooner we have you put away in that sanitarium, the better off you're going to be.
JR was always competing with little brother Bobby, both for control of the family oil business and the love of their hapless, long-suffering ma and pa, Jock and Miss Ellie. Bobby was the good brother, the one who wanted to play by the rules.
I've put up with all the wheeling and dealing and backstabbing that I'm going to.
There was just one other problem. The Ewings were locked in a bit of feud with a rival oil dynasty by the name of Barnes, and Bobby had just gone and married Pamela Barnes. That didn't best please the rest of the Ewings.
Ooh, I love this song.
And that's where it all began. In 1978, filming started on what began as a mere 5-part miniseries. The leading man was Patrick Duffy, still damp from his success as the web-footed heartthrob in The Man from Atlantis. His new bride, Pamela Barnes, was played by Victoria Principal, and together they would very quickly become TV's hottest couple.
Day one, scene one, take one, was Victoria and I in the car pulling up to the service station. I remember it vividly. It somehow was that important to me. I love that scene. I actually still have the leather jacket that I wore in that red Mercedes.
It had to be 5 below zero. I'm exaggerating, but it was freezing. And we were supposed to be driving back to tell the Ewings that we were married.
Your folks are gonna throw me right off that ranch.
Relax, honey. You're my wife now. You're family. You are a Ewing. And once that sinks in, they're gonna love you like I do.
Before it sinks in is what worries me.
Relax, sweetheart. Everything's gonna be fine.
freezing cold. It's a wonder when we kissed, we didn't break our lips.
We almost had to be broken apart because my lip gloss literally froze to Patrick's lips. It was a very uncomfortable kiss.
We were all just like, boy, this would be a great thing if it lasted. Because here I am working with one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she's married to me. It was like, this is such a cool job. I worked with fish before.
Patrick's enthusiasm was mirrored by Victoria, convincing us all that for Bobby and Pam, it was the real thing.
We're watching an episode of Dallas, and I looked over and my wife's doing this. She's looking really sad. And I said, well, what's the matter? She said, she saw something. I don't even know what she saw. But she said, I thought you only did that with me.
It was a wonderful, magical chemistry. And up until then, not only not America, but nor had the world ever seen a married couple that was hot. I mean, Pam and Bobby liked to have sex, and that was really unusual.
Even the crew were captivated.
We could cut, or you guys could just get off on this, one or the other.
In the beginning, Dallas had far more to do with Rumpty Tumpty than oil rigs. Pam's marriage to Bobby didn't only annoy the Ewings. South Fork's randy ranch hand Ray Krebs, played by Steve Kanaly, was mighty sore too, since he had once been engaged to Pam. But by scene 22 of episode 1, he was seeking solace in the arms of the Ewing granddaughter Lucy, played by Charlene Tilton.
How could a fella forget being in the hayloft with a beautiful girl like Charlene Tilton?
Steve Kanaly and I had some incredibly, really pushing the envelope love scenes. They really didn't show that kind of stuff at that time.
Call me her name.
Pam.
Again?
Pam.
Remember, he looked at me and went, I thought you'd be a little bit older. I mean, I looked like I was 12. I was 17, but I looked like I was 12.
I'm telling you, I'm feeling like some sort of pedophile. She's just 17, and she's this 4'11" young woman, and she's planning this big kiss on me, and the director says, speak to Charlene about it, you see, because we can't see her tongue kissing you in that way. The network will never show it. I had to tell her, and she said, oh, okay, no problem. I don't want him to cut my scene. She was just putting her heart and soul into the part.
Steve's lying, but Steve was the one with the tongue, not me.
In the beginning, the character we all remember Dallas for was in the background. No one thought a bad guy like JR could be the star. But it was clear from the cast's very first meeting that, with Larry Hagman on board, things were never going to be straightforward.
Nobody beats old JR. You know that.
We had a reading before we went down to Texas. So we all got there, good little actors that we were, and we're all walking in going, hello, how are you? Oh, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And then Hagman walked in. And Hagman walked in, dressed all in fringed leather, with a giant big hat, and a big tooled saddlebags. And in the saddlebags were stuffed bottles of champagne.
I remember looking at him thinking, oh my God, this is going to be my, quote, husband. This eccentric wacko is going to belong to me. Lucky me.
That's how we got to know each other. And it was perfect. It became a cocktail party atmosphere. And that maintained itself for 13 years.
Larry had just had a huge hit with his role in I Dream of Jeannie. And coming from a show business family, he was used to life in the limelight. And as JR, he hogged it all. From the very beginning, nasty JR was scheming to bust up Pam and Bobby's marriage. He arranged for Ray to get her soaked. And then for Bobby to find Pam in a state of undress with her old flame.
Bobby, if I were you...
If I were you, I'd shut up.
But Bobby rumbled JR's master plan.
It stops right now, JR.
This big emotional scene, I'm acting my heart out, and I spin him around to grab him.
It was a dumb, stupid trick, man!
I'm acting my ass off here.
If you ever do it again, your brother!
And I went like that.
Like that.
He broke up. He just fell apart. So that was kind of our signature. Sorry I didn't have more spit, but I just couldn't work it up.
It was like, okay, I get it. Everything is fair game, and let's have fun. And we did.
And when the cast messed around, the cameras kept on rolling.
Patrick and Larry are a couple of the biggest clowns you ever want to meet in your life, and they just feed off of each other. I am absolutely boring up against those two. They were like little children, you know. They just couldn't help themselves, especially at dining room scenes.
Dinner's ready. Should we go in?
We would cringe every time we'd open the script and there would be this Ewing family dinner. We'd think, oh, no, we have to sit through one of these. So Patrick and Larry would always have food fights. They would put a dinner roll on a fork, and then they'd hit it and it would fly across.
Roll, JR? Yeah. Nice.
Patrick and Larry were just kids. And at first it was just the two of them. But pretty soon Linda Gray and I just gave up and joined in. It was easier.
Luke, go up to the main house. Have him call a doctor.
I can't even begin to tell you how hard it was to make love to Bobby Ewing. Patrick tormented me.
It was just whatever was on the set that day. I'd bring it to bed in one of our bedroom scenes.
He had someone push a dummy's leg between us while we were making love, so that I thought that the biggest thing I'd ever come across in my life had just slipped up my groin, and I screamed and ran off the stage. And I would get upset, and he would always talk me out of it.
Because of our relationships, we were able to have an incredible amount of fun, goof off, and still get the work done on time, and have the best atmosphere.
The party at South Fork would go on for 13 years. Later, we catch up with the cast as they are today.
Brave.
See how life has treated them since they closed the gates of the world's most famous ranch behind them. Tonight, long after they were famous as Ray and Donna Krebs, actors Steve Kanaly and Susan Howard are returning to South Fork 11 years after Dallas ended. The feuding Ewings are long gone, but for Steve and Susan, the ranch is full of memories.
This place looks like you could make a TV series here. What do you think?
Looks pretty good. I expect to see Miss Ellie standing out on the porch waving at us.
Yeah, it seems just as like yesterday when that was the case.
Hadn't changed a whole lot. What was your first thought when you came up here?
Well, it just seems like all the years just vanished and we were out here yesterday.
South Fork was actually too small to film inside, so interior scenes were shot in a studio in Hollywood. But South Fork came into its own for the many ranch action scenes.
The first time I was here, we were sitting up there in the stand, and you and Patrick were on the bulls. The funniest things. When y'all would be there and about ready to come out, you'd take your head, you'd pull it down like you were Steve McQueen.
Well, I was. I was John Wayne and Steve McQueen and all those guys rolled up.
It was so Hollywood.
Let's have a hand for Ray Krebs.
You get in there, you cinch that thing down and get all wrapped up around there. And we actually were on those bulls, as you recall. And they are mean and dangerous. And you can definitely get hurt in there. It's not a place where actors should be. And about the time you go like this, like, let them out. And then you would jump out of there.
Here comes Ray Krebs.
If they actually let him out, you would have been in deep
You would have been
doo-doo.
there.
We faked him out, didn't we? People said, gosh, you know, you're really a cowboy. I said, oh, no. I remember there were some scenes that I played in this barn that had to do with Charlie, you remember, and she was misbehaving.
Yes. Who was her boyfriend?
Well, oddly enough.
Wait a minute. This was what's his face?
One of them was Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt.
I had totally forgotten about that.
I remember
and
that.
somebody said, you know, do you remember when Brad Pitt was on this show? I said, you mean Brad Pitt? He says, yeah, well, you had scenes with him. I said, I did?
You get off this ranch and you stay off it. Get out of here. Go on. Yes, sir.
And then whatever happened to Brad Pitt?
Every year, the entire cast decamped to Texas for filming. Before the show struck oil, the future stars had to make do with down-home accommodation.
In the beginning, we used to stay at a motel that was so basic, we used to call it the Roach Coach. Because if you missed your ride to work, you could always ride one of the roaches. They were that big.
On set, things were hardly more glamorous, and certainly not cool.
It was 126 degrees, very, very hot. We used to take paper towels and put it in the midriff of our clothes because we would just be sweating through. Not very attractive, but we had to do it.
You can feel that little bead of sweat in your hair, and it's kind of running down. You're going, I've got to get this line done before it gets to the hairline. They're going to see it come down my forehead. Beak, and then you were done. They'd cut and you go in and dry off again. It was desperate out there at times. And I think that's a reason we learned to do our scenes so quickly.
Shooting needed to be brisk because there was a heck of a lot of plot shenanigans to get through. Let's recap. Bobby saw an ex-girlfriend return with a child that may or may not be his. Pam lost a baby before finding a mother. Lucy found her long-lost father and reunited him with her long-lost mother. But whilst these three were being kept busy with all that, the show's emphasis was changing. JR was moving centre stage with his regular spats with boozy Sue Ellen and mortal enemy Cliff Barnes.
The only way I could get the message through that thick skull of yours was to have you bankrupt your mama's company while I just sat back and watched it.
No, I'm not finished yet.
Sure you are. Tomorrow morning, the janitor's going to come in here and sweep you out with the rest of the trash. Unless, of course, you do the honorable thing. Get in the elevator, go up the roof, and jump off, huh?
Larry was a genius. Larry saw from the beginning that you could make a wonderful character out of this villainous guy. It was not even his story. It was the Barneses and the Ewings, Pam and Bobby. It was their show. And Larry just came in and stole it.
I'm J.R. Ewing. I don't get ulcers, I give them. The character of J.R. was like a license to steal. It was so much fun. Yeah, Mama should have had her tubes tied after I was born. You could play it absolutely straight because the words took care of themselves. Saying terrible things is just part of my charm, I guess. And if you did it with a smile, you could be stabbing somebody in the back and have more fun. Yeah, once you get rid of integrity, the rest is a piece of cake. It was wonderful.
One of Dallas's leading attractions was the tempestuous rowing of JR and semi-sottle, totally luckless Sue Ellen.
Tell me, JR, which slut are you going to stay with tonight?
What difference does it make? Whoever it is, it's got to be more interesting than the slut I'm looking at right now.
Despite his new high profile, Larry Hagman's attitude to filming never really changed. The Dallas outtakes show how he still managed to find time to amuse himself and everyone else.
Sue Ellen Ewing was lying in a hospital bed.
When we were first married, I just loved her so much.
Larry does this incredibly emotional farewell, and oh, she can't die, Bobby, she just can't, a little tear.
Oh, Bobby, she's got to live. Patrick says, would it help if we sang that old song we used to when we were kids, JR?
I was lying there thinking, this is not in my script.
Do your balls hang low? Do they swing to and fro? Do they itch like a bitch when you drag them in the ditch?
Can you throw them over your shoulder like a continental soldier? Do your balls hang low?
I was trying everything I could to not laugh. And at a particular moment, I couldn't help it, and I started laughing. I could have killed them both. The crew was hysterical, and that was one of those, you know, Dallas moments. It was great. It was terrific.
The cast were having the time of their lives.
I'll have to carry her to the car.
There was just one cloud on the horizon. To boost ratings, the network wanted the season to end with the ultimate cliffhanger.
The show had been sort of slumping along. It had developed an audience, but not much of one. Towards the end of that year, CBS said, could we have a couple more shows? Oh, holy smokes, what do we do? How do we... Wait a minute. Why don't we just shoot him? Shoot JR? Yeah. Why not? Well, who's going to shoot him? Well, we don't even have to decide today.
Who's there?
Holy smokes, that might work. You hear the gunshot, you see him take the hit, he goes to the floor, freeze frame, end of the season. From that moment on, this show was the leading show in television for the next 6 years. And it was just like that.
For the first time ever, a London betting establishment made book on a fictional event. Who shot JR?
Of course, the cast couldn't wait to add their twist to the speculation.
Take that, son of a bitch, and
I was offered $250,000 if I would divulge who shot me. I didn't know. But I thought, that's a real JR thing to do.
Take that.
To tell them, and it's totally wrong.
Take that.
Pick up my money and go.
Take that, and that, and that.
Missed. I didn't do that. That would be a JR thing to do, and I prided myself in not being JR in my real life.
Oh, no, darling, no kisses. I have a terrible cold. I wouldn't want to get it.
Hagman took advantage of public interest by threatening to leave the show unless granted a massive pay rise. He landed in London to headline the Royal Variety performance.
I was making decent money, but nothing like I was worth or I felt I was worth, so I asked for what I felt I was worth. And, you know, I realized that if I hadn't gotten it, I'd probably never work in the business again. I mean, that would have been the end of my career.
The threats that come, you'll never work again, and yada, 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 and we'll cut you off, we'll recast. Which threats can... Really? With whom? Hello? There is no way you could have Dallas without Larry Hagman.
Cheating at poker to win me some dollars, twisting the ear of a kid till he hollers, scaring young girls with lascivious grins. These are just some of my favorites.
The studio eventually accepted most of Hagman's demands, and he returned to South Fork in his own helicopter to a standing ovation. The Royal Variety performance was not nearly so successful.
La, 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 and I forgot that particular lyric.
But he wasn't the only Dallas denizen to hit a bum note by turning to music.
My manager talked me into it. The record was mediocre at best, but it was fun. So, it did well.
I actually have a gold record in Europe.
You are the land, I am the sea. You are in counterpoint to me.
The only reason that thing exists in the universe is because of Dallas. Oh, cool, I'll do a record. That'll be something I've never done before.
And together we're strong.
Dallas and its stars were now major news. When the episode that revealed who shot JR came to Britain, it was kept under armed guard until broadcast. Over 20 million Brits tuned in to find out who had tried to murder the Texan they loved to hate.
It turned out to be Mary Crosby. Well, I was having a little affair with her, and she happened to be my wife's sister. And she thought she was knocked up, so that's why she shot me.
However, as Dallas featured more glamour and gunfire and less cowpoking and yee-hawing, so there was less and less for Steve Kanaly to do. With uncharacteristic generosity, JR came to his rescue. Larry Hagman was now directing occasional shows, and a major power behind the scenes with enough clout to change storylines.
I was ready to quit. And Larry says, don't leave this show now, Steve. Let's work on this together.
I have a fourth son. I said, well, how about you being the bastard son?
I found that out yesterday.
I kind of mentioned it to producers, and they made him the bastard son.
Ray. Welcome to the family, boy.
There was only one hitch. Ray had been in the hayloft with Lucy. That was his niece. So it was a little dicey there, you know. We had to kind of play that down. It took the third year before we were able to bring that into the show.
Ray and I very clearly had been together for quite a bit of time in the beginning. And then we find out he's a Ewing, so yikes. They just kind of ignored that and went right on.
Events at South Fork were becoming more and more twisted and bizarre, but real life would become more shocking than anything that happened on screen, striking down members of the cast and their nearest and dearest.
His parents had been killed, murdered, shot with a double-barrel shotgun, both of them in the chest, died, boom, immediately.
By the mid-80s, Dallas was the most popular TV show on Earth, watched by more than 300 million viewers in over 90 countries every week. The stars of the show were the most highly paid television actors ever, and everyone wanted to bask in reflected glamour. Even the Reagans called in JR to be Santa Claus at the White House Christmas gathering.
It was pandemonium. I mean, Larry literally couldn't go anywhere. It was an amazing thing. But that's by being in 300 million living rooms every week.
We were recognized wherever we were every day of our lives in over 100 countries around the world.
I was doing publicity in South Africa. They had about 20,000 people. Part of the second floor caved in. People were hurt. It was a mess.
Victoria's principle is on live and breathe. In real life, you've been married for how long?
3 weeks. Back then, it was unheard of that there'd be helicopters and that people be in trees, and but all of those things were happening that day during the wedding. The sound was obliterating our wedding. Harry and I look at each other like, is this happening?
People are watching us between their feet. You know, they got their beer, they can go to the bathroom, they talk while we're talking, they make love, they do whatever, but we're in their home. And they see us on the street, and they just don't know how to make the transition.
People related. They thought that the actor was the character.
Do you practice on the drunkenness when you're off the set?
No, I don't. They would walk up to me on the street, send little letters. You know, well, I spoke to my therapist, and my therapist thinks you should do this.
It's dangerous. It's like being a criminal. You have to set up a space around yourself, like the no-tread space, leave me alone space.
I came back at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was a gorgeous woman in my bed. She said, my husband's away for the weekend. I thought we might have a little fun, JR. I had a glass of champagne with her. That was it.
But real life couldn't always be kept at arm's length, as the cast discovered one fateful afternoon during filming. The Ewing men were on a hunting trip when it became clear all was not well with Jim Davis, alias Big Jock Ewing.
It was a really hot day, and the wind was blowing. So you didn't feel as hot, but you were evaporating all the time. Everybody was dehydrating, and he wasn't drinking water or anything.
We're all out in the sun doing this scene, and Jim just out of the blue says, "What are we doing here?" And we all laughed like he was making a joke. Nothing, Jim. Who knows what we're doing? He goes, "No, what the hell are we doing here?"
I said, well, we're out, you know, we're shooting in Dallas. Dallas? What the hell are we doing in Dallas? We were making a television show.
What show? And everybody kind of went, what show? And he knew who he was, but he didn't know where he was. He had no concept of Dallas.
We knew that he was wobbly. We didn't know that it was cancer. We just thought he was having a heat stroke.
Doctors discovered a tumor on Jim's brain, and he began a course of chemotherapy. Despite being given 2 years to live, he went straight back to work.
Every day, going through chemo treatment and radiation, God bless him, he lost his ability to stand on his own. He lost his balance. His hair came out. We had to put a wig on him. We had to sit him down at the table, and he would not give up.
It was a sad thing to see such a towering image of strength be debilitated like that in every way but his spirit.
It was sad. Very sad.
We were a family, and to lose a member was like losing a member of your family. Very sad. And think of him to this day.
Jim's death had to be written into the Dallas plot line, and soon Jock would disappear in a plane crash.
They say that... they say that... Oh... They say... that Jock is dead.
The show just had to go on. Miss Ellie bagged herself a new husband, Clayton, played by Howard Keel. Barbara Bel Geddes, who played Miss Ellie, decided to leave. So in stepped Donna Reed, but she was still meant to be Miss Ellie. Well, at least for a year, when Barbara Bel Geddes decided to return, and Miss Ellie was Miss Ellie again. Bobby's love life was just as confusing. When he divorced Pam, his new love interest was Jenna. She had been played by 2 different actresses before a third stepped in. One of the most famous women in the world, Elvis's widow, Priscila Presley.
I'm sorry we're late, everybody.
Coming into that cast, after reading about it every week through the tabloids, I think I was scared to death. I mean, I thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? They've been together for so long. Here comes the newcomer. And to my surprise, they welcomed me, with open arms.
Jenna, I'd like to officially welcome you back to South Fork.
It's nice to be back, JR. You look lovely. I changed outfits 4 times. I guess I was a little nervous.
Well, no reason to be nervous. We're all just one big happy family, right, JR?
That's right, Ray.
I couldn't have asked for anything better. I was signed for a year and ended up doing it for 5 years, so I really became part of the show.
Darling, why don't you sit in your regular place here? And that's right, Jenna. You sit in Pam's old chair.
Although newcomers were readily accepted into the Dallas extended family, it was the veteran stars who had the off-screen clout.
It actually was negotiated into my contract how many times a year I would be seen in a bathing suit or in a teddy. And I used to call it the 3 teddy year.
Now, Bobby.
Now what, honey?
I would not be seen in more than either 3 bathing suits or 3 teddies. Not 6, but 3. They had to divide it up because I felt that it was abusing me.
Just as Larry Hagman had done, Steve Kanaly used his influence to become an occasional director of the program. But Steve Kanaly's debut behind the camera turned out to be one of the cast's most tragic days.
The very first show that I directed, I'm driving through Beverly Hills to Culver City, 6 o'clock in the morning, listening to the talk radio, and I hear this announcement.
Actor Patrick Duffy, who plays Bobby Ewing on the TV series Dallas, today received word that his parents had been murdered, apparently during a holdup in a bar that they owned in Boulder.
Kind of went in one ear and went out the other ear, and then it settled in, and I went, oh my God.
I got to the set, and somehow I knew what had happened, and I called his house and he answered, and we spoke, and he told me he wasn't coming in. And I don't remember much about the rest of the day. I think it was probably on autopilot for the rest of the day.
We got word that his parents had been killed, murdered, shot with a double-barrel shotgun, both of them in the chest, died, boom, immediately.
I arrive, and everybody now has heard Patrick is not going to be on the set as was scheduled, and my entire crew was totally devastated. This is like my first day as the director. It's not an easy thing to do, but I had to say, okay, you have to pull yourself out of this. I told them that Patrick would want us to work as best we could. I said, let's just come in here and put our nose to the grindstone. Everything worked absolutely without flaw, but it was one of those moments that you never forget. And of course, directing is full of moments like that, but that was a tragic thing.
It was a terrible time. I mean, to have a murder like that and to be so close to someone like Patrick who had that horrible thing happen. But, he's a Buddhist and he can get over that kind of stuff because we're all just on a wheel. We keep coming back all the time.
When he did come in, everyone was very tense. What do we say to him? How do we approach him? Is everyone else going to go up? Do I go up when they do? Do I wait? How would I feel? What would I want? Gosh, it's hard to even relive that moment.
With not being a blood relative of mine, the cast of Dallas was as close to family as my sister is to me. So they knew inherently, however they knew the right way to welcome me back. That didn't make it like, shh, we can't talk about anything, or, oh, what do we say, or anything. It was like a family member. They knew exactly, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was so normal to go back to work. It wasn't uncomfortable. I didn't have to go, okay, everybody, I'm going to make a speech now about it. Just went back to work. It was perfect. It was truly is like a family.
But like any family, members leave the nest.
It was night, not the Texas sun, and the camera was on the water. It started on the water, remember?
On one, the camera pans up from the water.
And then it comes up. I'm all pensive and whatever.
And Ray makes a clean
upset.
entrance. Says, kind of chilly out there. You want a coat?
And Donna said, no, I'm fine.
Well, I'm not.
Ray walks up and says,
Donna.
Ray touched her and she flinched.
I want you to come back to me.
And with all that she can muster, she looks him dead in the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And says,
I don't think I can.
I don't think so, good boy.
well, Ray is very pompous. He says,
I don't know why.
you love me because I'm just such a great guy. And you know I love you because I wouldn't cheat on anybody else.
She says, give me a break.
We've had our differences, you know.
Everybody that's married has differences.
Right.
Just hear me out then, would you?
No. No. She was a fool.
Well, she went off to bigger and better things in politics.
She did?
That's what I thought.
Is that what they said?
That's what they told
me.
me.
They lied.
Oh.
But there was one departure that would shake South Fork to its core. Patrick Duffy wanted Bobby to make a grand exit. They even sent a car for him.
Bobby?
I didn't want to ride off into the sunset and then have everybody pretend that I might be coming back any minute. So I said, we really should kill him. Just kill him dead. And they thought, oh, and they finally agreed. So I died.
When Patrick left the show, what a sad thing. We all love Patrick. You know, here we have this fella dying. I cried real tears. I had no trouble at all imagining that it was going to be no more Patrick.
Don't do this to me, Bobby. Don't leave me.
I begged him not to leave. I begged Sue Ellen not to leave, too. But, you know, they felt it was a time to go on and do other things. Well, Patrick found out it was time to come back, too.
Between them, Larry and Patrick would concoct one of the most memorably bonkers plots in soap opera history to bring prodigal Bobby back to the Dallas fold. Following the tragic death of Bobby James Ewing, the antics at South Fork were losing their grip on the public's imagination. Ratings had slumped, and Patrick Duffy's career after Dallas hadn't exactly set the world alight.
Have you noticed what happens when you rent from DER? You get richer.
I worked, I did commercials, I did some stuff, and then, you know, in all honesty, it wasn't anywhere near as good out there as it was on Dallas.
Patrick and Larry are still the best of friends to this day.
Hello here.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I hate doing this every single time. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy.
So, how's your career?
Together, these two perennial jokers would rewrite soap history at a stroke.
Praise.
I got a phone call from Larry, and he says, come on out, take a jacuzzi and have a drink. And I looked at my wife, I said, they're going to ask me to come back on the show. That's weird. And she said, you can't come back unless that whole year was a dream. We laughed, went ha ha ha, and I went out to talk to Larry and he said, come on back, we're going to have fun. And I thought, yeah, I'm not having fun out here. And then I came back.
TV programs discussed it. Newspapers reported it. How exactly would Bobby Ewing be brought back from the dead?
No cast member knew what was going to happen, including Victoria.
Millions tuned in on Friday night to witness Bobby's apparent resurrection.
Nobody knew how I was coming back on the show.
Everyone thought Bobby would appear during a wedding scene.
Come on, Bobby!
But that was not to be.
I couldn't film anywhere on a lot in Los Angeles because somebody would know what we were doing. So Leonard hired a commercial crew, a crew of guys who only do television commercials. And he bought a case of Irish Spring soap, and we built a shower.
I was called in to come do the scene unexpectedly, and I had this from wardrobe, but I had never worn it, so I had taken it home to keep it. I think that's called theft, but nevertheless, they called me and they said, do you have something of your own you could bring? So I thought, oh, I might as well bring in the one I took. And I brought it in, went to the shower, opened the door, and no one was there. I thought I was supposed to be having a nervous breakdown. So one of the happiest days of my life was when they cut it together and Patrick was in the shower.
I actually turned and said, good morning. And you can have a good morning, too, if you wake up like the Duffys and shower with Irish Spring. And when we watched the show in my house that night, I probably counted to 30, and the phone rang. And it was Victoria.
I have no idea what I said. I'm just sure that I was incredibly happy, and I'm probably cursed.
She's going, I can't believe that. She had no idea it was going to be that. So it was very exciting. It was really cool.
Despite massive audience figures for the shower episode, it did leave one slight difficulty. Namely, the instant dismissal of one whole year's worth of Dallas episodes, 30 hours of plot development, new characters, and the usual twists now had to be ditched as just a dream. Dallas fans were crazy for the show, but were they this crazy?
It's almost like, name the thing that you have the hardest time accepting on Dallas, and most people would say, it's that dream thing. I just don't know if I like that or not.
I don't think the public appreciated it. That wasn't what they wanted. They had lived through the death.
It was the only way to explain everything, but it was the only way to explain everything when the show had already lost its way.
Couldn't he have gone away and been the man in the iron mask, and they discover him in a dungeon somewhere and rip the, oh my gosh, it's Bobby.
Dreams solve all kinds of problems in literature. You can wake up, Midsummer Night's Dream, they wake up. They wake up with ears, but they wake up.
Of course, in their estimation, you just throw it out there, and if they love it, they love it, and if they hate it, they do, and they did. And the show just kind of went,
What's happening in life, boy?
Well, right now I'm half blind.
Did we order that?
No, we haven't ordered.
We haven't ordered yet.
You ordered La Bamba.
Look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
With Patrick back in the prickly bosom of his family, JR and Bobby's dirty double act was resumed, but Dallas never regained its popularity. The South Fork saga would run for 5 more years of endless revolving storylines and an ever-evolving cast. Then, after 13 years and 356 episodes, Dallas came to a final freeze frame, 1991. The cast were at last free to flee the Ewing mansion and reinvent themselves in the outside world.
God, Larry, remember when we used to do this with something other than iced tea?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think anybody could keep up with Hagman. Hagman had practiced at his drinking for 40 years.
I drank 4 or 5 bottles of champagne a day, but I never got drunk or anything. Just kind of kept that, that even kind of click going all day.
He'd come in the morning, I'd have a glass of champagne with him at like 7 a.m. And then I'd have to bow out until lunch, but he would just keep that going. But he also was never out of control, and we never lost a square frame of footage because of him drinking, ever.
There are reports from California this morning that actor Larry Hagman is getting a new liver.
Larry received news that he was going to have a liver transplant. That was traumatic. I mean, that's life-threatening. And we're such close friends that you really think, is this the last time I'm going to see him?
The damage had been done to my liver. It didn't matter whether I drank it or not, and it just disintegrated. And then when they opened me up, they said I had 2 weeks to live, so we were right under the wire there.
I was one of the first to see him after he came home, and I remember it to this day. He was alive. Larry was alive, and we just sat there and cried. Yeah.
As for South Fork, the Ewing Ranch is still home to a lot of memories.
Do you remember that time, the scene with Larry? When it was really a joy. I got to shove JR in the swimming pool. Do you remember that?
Was he not expecting it? This is scripted?
No, sort of like you're not.
And despite filming never having actually taken place inside South Fork, it's now home to a tour.
Each room has a fictitious theme, because actually all of the interiors for the show Dallas were never filmed here. So actually, as y'all are walking through the house today, you really won't recognize the thing, but I hope you'll enjoy the tour.
Dallas may have lost the black stuff, but it still has the old black magic.
I guess what I would miss most are just the people. But when we see each other, picks up just like right where it left off.
There were days when we argued, and days when we cried, days when we laughed, and days when we kissed. Like any family.
It was like surfing. It was like surfing through life with your extended family.
For 13 years, I couldn't wait to get in the car and go to work. Every single day. I didn't have a bad day at work in all those years.
I'll meet you back at the ranch.
What?